OGAccountability.com. Good morning, everyone. This is David with OG Accountability. I want to thank you so much for joining in with us again. Have Liz Marshall with us here today. Liz, thank you so much for being here.
Good to see you again.
And Liz I asked her to bring. Liz just made the cover of Muscle and Fitness for May 2023. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing these. We're happy to celebrate in your success. And I know you have a lot more to come. We kind of been sitting here talking this morning, and we're going to hit on a topic that I don't think it matters where you are on this planet. Every human being has sensed some kind of fear. And fear comes in different shapes and sizes. Some people are afraid of the dark. Some people are afraid of the light. And, I mean, what are you scared of?
What am I scared of? I used to think it was more surface level stuff, I guess, as I was when I was younger, maybe because I, associated fear with like scary movies or like a haunted house or something like that. But as I've gotten older, in the process of doing personal development work and, looking at myself more introspectively and I guess just becoming a more mature and wise person, I've realized that most of my fears are things that are like deep and internal, about, I think they're about life really. And some of them go back to self-esteem. Like some of them go back to, I don't know, but I think fear is a huge driver for a lot of us in this world, unfortunately.
Fear does motivate. Fear can cripple and fear can motivate,
Yes.
It depends on the person. Am I scared of this, so I'm going to make sure I give it all my attention, or am I scared of this, so I'm going to avoid it? And being a man, men compartmentalize a lot of their fears. They don't express a lot. And I actually don't think that's because we're broken or there's something wrong with the fear. I think it's just kind of been accustomed to society that we just don't talk about it. Guys will, with the very few select friends they have, somebody they can truly trust, they may open up and talk about, hey, I'm worried about this. But a lot of times, and in my experience in dealing with people, a lot of men don't express their fears until it's too late, until they are literally in the drowning fight or flight mode. And then they will express, their fear and what's going on. But for the most part, a lot of men don't.
Yeah. Women have fears too, that prevent them from doing things that are good for them. But I think the thing that prevents men from doing that is a fear of being judged. Like you said, I think most things in life are a combination of nature and nurture, personally, just from what I've seen. And I think that's no different. But I think men are socialized to be more stoic than is healthy for them. Because I think one of the great things about masculinity is being a firm foundation. So it's not that that's a bad thing. It's not that's a great trait to develop as a man, but you have to balance that with other things as well. But I think it's the fear of being seen a certain way or being thought of a certain way, that vulnerability is weak. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fear of weakness is a really big weakness because it'll keep you from asking questions when you should. I've been in situations when I was younger. I was the kind of guy, and I get this from my dad, and it used to bother me because when he would be dealing with people in business, whatever it was, he would ask so many questions, and I'm like, Pop, that's because he was smart enough and he had been successful enough in business to realize I need to find out everything you're talking about. There's not going to be any hidden red tape, so I need to know that we are exactly on the same page. So I was the kind that I always asked a lot of questions, but I sat through presentations to where, and this is what I learned in life, just because somebody has a leadership role does not mean that they are an effective leader in communication. So I've sat and had people teach something that they had no right to be teaching. It didn't mean they didn't understand the concept of what it was they were explaining. They just weren't a good teacher. And ask questions. Now, why did you do that? Now, why this? And can you explain? And when you're dealing with somebody that's not a good teacher, they get irritated. But a good teacher will say, "No, thank you for that question." They'll explain. They'll learn to explain it a different way. Having said that, the fear of looking like a fool, I've sat in situations and the teacher walk off and somebody go, "I have no clue what he was talking about," and then 3 or 4 guys speak up like, "I have no clue," and I'm like, "Well, why didn't you say anything?" Because they were scared to look like a fool,
Yes.
and that is fear is so crippling when you don't realize that it's a fear. Sometimes people think that's reality. Fear is not reality. Fear is a mental based situation. Fear isn't something you go and buy at a store. It's not something that can be. Now, fear can be handed down. A good example, there's not a lot I'm afraid of. Like anybody who knows me, I am always just calm and cool. My mom is deathly afraid of storms. And now she grew up, in the Missouri, Kansas area. I mean, they had a lot of storms. Her verbal talk about it has created a fear in my daughter. The second the sky turns dark, Dad, is there going to be a tornado? Dad, what are we going to do? And so I actually built in her room, her closet is built as a safe room. So it is solid wood. It's structurally 2x6s that are put on 6-inch centers. And she's got a large walk-in closet. Her walk-in closet's probably 5x6 or 7. And the whole, that's a safe room for her. So she always knows if there's a storm, she goes to her closet because she's scared of storms. That is a real fear, but that's a fear that's handed down.
Yes.
That's something that is deposited into somebody's mind.
It's taught.
Yeah, it's taught. So there's taught fear, but fear's not something that just appears because you want it to.
Well, I feel like there's, also fear is, like one of the most like primal, like just reactionary responses that humans have. Animals too. Like that's actually one of the only like you see a cat, you make a loud noise and it about hits the ceiling, because that's just like a limbic response to loud noises or whatever. Like we have that too, but no, I think like if you don't know a stove's hot, you might touch it and you learn it's hot, and so you don't, there's a fear created there that's a healthy fear. I think like we've talked in past episodes, it's balance like anything else. Like it's normal to have healthy fear in life of things that are dangerous or bad for you, but it's when I don't know.
This just popped in my head. When you get balanced, one of the things you'll learn in life is taking your fear and turning it into respect. Instead of fearing something, I respect it.
That's true.
And that can be in there's people with fear of relationships. Things I went through, I don't ever want to go through again. So there's just certain fearful aspects of my life that I shut down in. Now, having said that, like you said, the stove is hot. I'm not scared that the stove's hot. I'm not like, I don't go through the whole house, hey, the stove's on, and nobody touch. No, but I've learned a respect for it.
Yes.
Just we're like, hey, don't touch that.
Well, and maybe you needed that. Like I don't think you're too different, but I firmly believe that our paths are directed and, and that we are given things that we need for a reason, even if they don't make sense at the time. So, like I can look back on my own life and see that in many ways. Like at the time, like, how could you allow this to happen to me? Like, this is so painful. And what did I do to deserve this? And and then, as I get older and I step more into my purpose and I see the things that are laid out for me in my life, like I see why I needed all these lessons.
Lessons in life that we don't take anything out of and actually step back when we get through it. When we go through seasons of our life, sometimes you don't realize you're in that until you've moved out of it. And then when you go back and reflect and you're like, what can I learn out of that?
Oh, hindsight's everything.
Everything. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But when we talk about fears, just recently, had another acquaintance, somebody I dealt a lot with. He chose to take his life, and the things that he was battling in, and one of the things that he would constantly talk about, it was cognizant fear of how his brain's going to work after being damaged, and was so fearful of what his kids were going to see as he began to deteriorate. Had severe traumatic brain injury, and a lot of people don't know when those holes are put in the brain, that's it.
The brain's not regenerative.
They do not regenerate,
Yeah.
and it. The sad part is that is looked upon and frowned upon. That most guys and girls that have been through certain situations, he was a combat veteran, and what he went through, they don't talk about it because they're embarrassed of their condition. What they can't truly see, that is a true form of mental illness. You have a damaged brain. Your brain does not work. But what I'm getting at is eventually they succumb to that fear of tomorrow. A lot of people are afraid of tomorrow, that they don't live in the moment. They're scared. When one of the things when we begin to talk about fear, and if you take it to the Word of God, to the Bible, the very first thing that God said that is going to hell, guess what the very first thing he said? The fearful. You can't operate in fear continually. And if you're a parent, if you're a mentor, and if you are fear-based, you are raising people that begin to be crippled as they grow up in life.
I agree, but something was just put on my heart while you were saying that I think he knew, though. I think God knew from the beginning that, well, he knew everything from the beginning, but that fear would be a big obstacle for humanity. Like that would be something that we wrestled with constantly, because that's the main tool of the enemy is fear. And he strikes fear in our hearts through deception mostly. But he gives us a lot of counsel and wisdom about fear too. And now that you say that, like I can look back on times in my life, many times, where I have been genuinely fearful, especially about like the state of the world. Like, look at all of this evil, like how, what are we going to do? And how is this going to turn out? And this fear. And if you really look back on it, I haven't given you a spirit of fear.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look back on it. I forget how many, I've actually looked into this, and it's mentioned a lot of times, fear is, and just all of these commands to have peace and how to do that. And I think that's like the biggest gift that God gives us is peace in the midst of fear.
When we operate in a mental state of normalcy, and what I mean by normalcy is normal's different for everybody, but where you get on a level playing field, you learn to have respect for the areas in your life that you can't control. And I think fear, for most people, that's what it is. It's a situation they can't control.
Yes. Or that they can't predict.
Yeah.
And I truly believe, having gone through many difficult things in my own life that were full of fear and lessons and all of this stuff, I believe that the purpose of those trials are to teach you to stop and trust, be still, like all of those things, be still, trust that I am God, all things work for your good, all of those things. And the older I get and I meditate on all of that, the more still I'm able to get. I really have come to believe that that's like one of our biggest missions in this world is to learn how to calm the storm within, and to do it like by meditating on all of these things that we were told about. I haven't given you a spirit of fear, and, victory, everything works for your good. And if I take it away, I'll give you twice back what I took from you. And just all of these things to like calm this fear within you. We're supposed to be focused on that.
That is the truth of the design that God put. And once again, not everybody finds their peace in Christ, in God. But I will tell you this, having said that, being raised in a pastor's home, which means I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of the great, and I've seen a lot of the ugly. I've seen the great side of humanity. I've seen the ugly side of humanity. I can tell you this unequivocally, 100% fact of what I have seen of the thousands of people. You ready for this?
Yes.
God, studying the Word of God, the Bible, and putting those principles, His principles, to use in your life. Out of the thousands upon thousands of people I've seen come through the church, counseled, those that chose to move into the things of Christ and God move and operate in a position of peace, less strife, and more joy. And people that are still trying to find their joy in the bottle, find it in the pill, they're running around, they're doing the meaningless things in life, kind of pretty much doing a lot of the things that God said not to do,
For a reason.
operate in fear, they operate in strife, they operate in hate, they're unhappy. So when I look at the balance of things, so people say, well, God's not real. Okay, well, out of the thousands of people, I can see the people that believe God is real, and they completely have a different sense and outlook on life on a lot of people who don't. And once again, you're going to have somebody hear this and say, well, I know this one guy who lives in my town, and he's the nicest. There's always an exception to the rule. But I have seen it unequivocally. The balance is way off kilter to the peaceful side, winning. And it's like, why would you continue to choose and go after things that bring you more fear?
Deception.
That's it. Alcohol causes more fear in your life.
But you're deceived. The whole world, for the most part, has been deceived about this is fun, this is happy, this is how you. Same thing with a lot of stuff that really just eats your soul away slowly while you believe this lie that it makes you happy. I mean, there's all sorts of things like shopping, consumerism, alcohol, porn. I mean, what else do people do to like take their mind somewhere else because, oh,
Golf.
this feels good. Well, I think you can make an okay case about golf.
Yeah, I will never quit golf.
I think that's an okay habit.
Yeah. Okay. I will never quit. There's something peaceful. I'm not going to start talking about golf. I'm sorry. I'll talk about it. But I did shoot a really good score the other day.
Well, I think that's a good habit to have. I don't think that's going to tax you too much in this world.
So if somebody's listening and there really are people who are truly crippled by fear, that's just like, we can get into this very in depth, but I watched people tear their families apart over this COVID. I've got to call it what it is. And now all of us, y'all are conspiracy theorists. It was a hoax. There was some truth to it, absolute truth. But the level that was pressed upon people, it was designed to affect those people who operate in fear.
Oh, absolutely. Well, the architects of control who have been, crushing all of humanity into the dirt for a long, long time. That's their number one weapon, far and away, is fear.
And we're going to have one Karen, or if you're a man, you're a jackass. You're going to write YouTube and say they're spreading COVID misinformation. No, we're not. Your own news media has come out and they have told you, and believe it or not, this is the one thing you can believe from the news, that everything that they told us to do was not correct.
No, it was designed to make you sicker and scareder and force you away from other people. And just there's an agenda at work. And the one good thing about COVID, well, there's a couple good things, just like silver linings about that whole thing. But people are starting to see now that there is absolutely some sort of centralized plot to do something nefarious afoot in this world.
And with the power of social media and the connection of people. We were just talking earlier. I saw Joe Rogan's podcast, and he was talking about all these woke companies, and people kind of just picked the big ones. He read a list of lots of companies that have gone to that wokeism, that have lost billions upon billions of dollars because us, the consumer, have finally said enough. And what we're going to see is a lot of people didn't speak up a lot of times, not because we're scared of our beliefs, but because we didn't realize how unified we truly are. But you're going to see people finally stepping up and saying, hey, enough with this crap. Enough.
Well, speaking of fear, one of my favorite maxims of all time, because it's true, is courage is contagious. But somebody has to go first. And going first is really, really tough sometimes.
Somebody's got to be the William Wallace.
That's right. No, somebody's got to be on the front lines and take all the arrows while everybody else rushes in the back. So people that do that, I have the ultimate level of respect for. People like James O'Keefe. That guy, like, are you kidding me? Like, but because of his example, like, that's so badly needed in this world. He's taking so much heat and so many arrows. The FBI, like, went and harassed him and raided his house. I mean, his willingness to put himself in the line of fire will inspire other warriors in droves. What a beautiful thing to do with your life. Like, you will be rewarded for things. Like, that's how I live. That's the only thing that matters to me is courage and doing the right thing and inspiring other people to fall in for righteousness and truth.
When we're scared, I try to think of something that scares me. I think the thing that scares me the most, or a fear of mine, is being in a situation that we see the craziness that's going on with active shooters, different stuff like that. My fear is my daughter be at school or be somewhere that I can't protect her. That is a fear that I deal with. Does that mean I lock her away in her room and never let her out and never experience life because the world's a wicked place? There's some people who operate that way, but I can't do that. I can't cripple her because of my fear. But I am very mindful of what she does and where we go, because that is a fear of mine. Now, it's not a crippling fear, but it is always in the back of my mind. That's why if you ever see me go anywhere with my daughter, she will tell me, "I always know you're watching me." And we have this weird. We can be at a main event and she's up on the sky track and I'm 100 yards away watching, and it's the weirdest thing. She always knows where I'm at, always, and she'll stop and she'll be like, and then go. And I'm not watching her. I'm watching her have a good time. I enjoy watching her have a good time. I have a good time when they do, but I'm in protecting mode.
I guarantee you, whether she's conscious of this, and she may not be, she's young, but whether she's conscious of it or not, she's really glad that her father's always watching her. I promise.
And I'm a sweet guy. And there's been a time where she saw Daddy Bear come out, and there was a guy acting very, and it was at I'm not going to say the name of the business, but it was at a place where they have bowling and all that stuff and laser tag. And there's a guy who's being really inappropriate. And he was making some of the parents, the mothers that were there, uncomfortable. That's the other thing. Being a single dad, most of the place I go, it's normally me and all the moms. But he was being inappropriate. And finally, I had enough. And it's time to go. And when I make my mind up, that's something that's a fear I operate in too. And I think women, y'all need to hear this. Sometimes you find your husband in a situation and sometimes they want to avoid stuff. They're like, no, let's just go. Let's say somebody's causing a scene. And they're like, no, let's just leave. You may leave the restaurant. You may do something like that. One of my fears is I don't want to be pushed to the point that I have to get violent. Not, well, I'm ready to fight. No, don't push me to the point that I have to get violent, because if I get to that point, the scared part of me is there is no going back.
But what's the point in fearing that? There's nothing that you can.
Well, what I'm getting at is avoiding situations. Let's say we're walking through a parking lot and there's a guy over here cussing everybody that walks through. If anybody walks through here, I'm gonna whip you. You know what? We'll just walk around and go to the truck. Instead of confront that, you choose your battles. Now, if I'm in a situation, a predicament to where we're walking and I can't get anywhere, and somebody's being violent and there is no escape, well, then I operate. But if I can avoid a situation, I'm going to avoid it, because the fear of me is if I have to get to that fight state, I become a completely different person. But I'm only going to do that in protection of my loved ones. It's not because somebody called me a sissy. I'm a sissy, whatever.
I mean, I don't know if I'd avoid like your life because of that.
No. But well, here's the way I'm trying to explain this nicely. I'd rather walk around and get in my truck than have to be handcuffed and go to jail because I killed a guy and hope I get off when I was 100% justified in what I was doing. So if I can avoid that situation, I'm going to avoid it. And that's the thing. You just don't know with people anymore. And so if there's somebody causing trouble, I'm not, and my family's there, well, we're just going to go on our way and we're going to head on. We're going to leave. Now, if you intersect me, that's a different story. But we have to learn to avoid things. That's just a fear of mine. If you get me escalated, I don't de-escalate. And if I finally stand up to say something, we're past the point of I'm sorry.
Right.
And that's a fear of mine. So I don't want to get in that situation, because I know the end outcome. And when we were just talking about COVID. I mean, there's families that I don't even know. They said and did unrepairable things to each other over this COVID pandemic. And then now that, nobody has to wear masks, and, now you don't have to quarantine. You don't have to do this. But the school's telling you if your kid has COVID, send them anyways. I mean, everything has changed. So what do? Do you call that family member up and say, Well, hey, I know I called you a dirty, rotten scoundrel and that you're ugly and your kids are ugly over the whole COVID deal, but well, everything's fine now.
Well, the people who did behave that way do owe people an apology. That was horrific. Like, if you behaved that way, you should be deeply ashamed of yourself.
But is it to some degree is it their fault or were they operating out of
So,
fear?
well, but that's what like so that's the nuance. Like, you should be deeply ashamed of your behavior. However, I don't think in many of the cases, in a lot of the cases, that it's reflective of who people are as a person. I think that a lot of really good people get swept up by fear in the form of propaganda, which is we're being assaulted with constantly at this point. And I think a lot of people have woken up to it, thank goodness. And I think COVID caused a lot of people to wake up to it, which is good. Like, this is a hard thing for people, to see, but I hope that, anybody who did behave that way, that feels bad about it now, that they do apologize and that it doesn't mean you're a bad person. You just have to acknowledge what happened and change your behavior and really make an effort to see, look what propaganda did to me. Like, look what it caused me to do to my own family. And it's because of fear. And a point like that, if you're self-aware enough to get to a point like that, that's how you can unravel yourself from all that stuff. It takes a lot of honesty and work. But yeah, like, I think that's one of the best things that people can do is look around and see how you're being manipulated with fear to think a certain way, behave a certain way, do certain things, because it's all around you all the time. And most people aren't aware of it.
And I think that's it. A lot of times people don't even realize what they're scared of.
Yeah, I didn't for a long time. Like, the things that drive me, like the fearful things that I think drive me deep down inside of, I wasn't aware of them.
I wasn't aware of certain instances until I had somebody question me, like somebody who knew me very well and say, "Hey, I want to ask you some questions," and they knew how to pinpoint certain areas and bam, 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 ask me questions that made me think, "Well, I guess I really didn't think of that." And when we have fear ingrained, it really just becomes who we are. And it almost becomes like the Hatfields and McCoys. We live with something so long, we don't even remember why.
Palestine and Israel are a lot like that. Or the
Yeah.
Jews and the Arabs are a lot like that. Like, why are we fighting for thousands of years again?
And when we begin to operate in a mindful position to realize we have to face some fears in our life. I'm scared of bears. I'm not going to go face one. Speaking of bears, did you see one swam up on a beach in Florida?
No.
A big black bear.
Talk about nightmares come true.
They're all just sitting there, and all of a sudden they're like, "What is that?" A black bear swims up on the beach and takes off running across the beach, and there is tons of people out there.
So, to be fair, black bears are actually some of the not too scary ones. Like, they don't want to confront you and they'll run. But
Put it this way, I would shoot Winnie the Pooh. Because I'm scared of bears.
But I will say grizzlies are, I mean, you see, that's a fear that I think, like, that's a good example of a fear that's healthy and normal. Like,
Yeah.
I think
That's a